Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Real Talk with Ben podcast. And first off, I want to say thanks to Diego for being on last week. It's truly been a blessing to get to know him, to get to know his story. It was kind of cool because I was kind of learning more about him as we were talking, and I felt like I had about a 3-part series with him. But it was really a great time just to hear other stories. It's kind of funny. I always say it this way, that I feel sometimes that I learn more about, I guess myself by learning about others. And it's weird because, many times I think it's hard to sometimes understand people's stories, but I think we can get pieces out of it. And, you know, for me, it's kind of what I've been saying for probably the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks is, you know, God is faithful and you can trust him. And hearing Diego's story, it was really cool. So I just wanted to quick little plug there just to thank him and to thank him for really taking his time to just spend with you all. So yeah, and I want to welcome you to episode 23. I think this is episode 23. My name's Ben. If you're new, I'm the host of this show, so kind of have to deal with me. But I like to talk about everything and anything. So here we go. And this week, believe it or not, it's not going to be as much of the coronavirus as one might think. All right. I'm not going to talk nearly as much as I have been, but I really want to talk about a few different things. I guess kind of like with what's going on in my ministry, but then also just some things that are on my head, I guess. I think the first thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was just some things that I've been learning spiritually in my life. As you know, and as you know from just hearing me talk about it for the past few months, you know, it's been a 6-month process for me to get here to Hungary. Some might say that that's a long time for me. At times it felt like an eternity, and other times it felt like it just happened. But I think what's so cool about this journey and me getting on a plane and traveling halfway around the world is God has been teaching me things along the way that I don't think otherwise I might not understand. And that might make sense, it might not, but I think it goes back to really where it started. You know, there was a lot of discussion with Here We're Life and back home and with my parents, and it felt like it was never going to get on the ground. I never thought I would actually I'd actually be able to do what I'm doing right now, as cliche as that sounds. But it's so cool to see how God was faithful. God opened these doors. If you remember, if you've watched any of my videos, way back, I think in August, I posted a video saying, you know, my goal was 2 years, is going to be 2 years in Hungary. And I love how that was my goal, but that wasn't what God wanted. Long story short, just due to some different things, We're Life Hungry, myself, as well as my family, thought it'd be best to do 1 year. And so doing 1 year is not what I was expecting, but it's going to be a very good time. And once that was all settled, you know, it's kind of, and that's what these 6 months have been. And the reason why I wanted to start there is because even from the beginning, I've been learning lessons. I've been gaining different different pieces of advice from so many people. And I think for some, it might be too much, but for me, it was, it's been a blessing. I remember back in, I think it was October, I was in the middle of student teaching, and if any of you are teachers out there, you know it's a very stressful time. You don't really have a lot of time to do a lot. but I remember it was a Friday night. I was coaching football, high school football back in the States. And one of the coaches who I knew personally wasn't a believer, he kind of made that known to me a few times. But he was really encouraging to me. He was saying that, you have to go do what you feel led to do. And that's coming from a non-Christian. And for me, I knew why I was doing it is not only did God put it on my heart, but God was opening this door. And as hard as it has been to be away from that football team and to be away from coaching and even the school I was at, it's been a learning experience. And it's that one thing really taught me is that everything that God has given you is a gift in a way. It might not feel like it, and even the bad circumstances might not feel like it, but in some way God has good coming from it. And so, yeah, in that same month, of October, my friend Adam and Annie here from Hungary, they were in the States raising support, and they spent, like 2 days with us. But the encouragement I got during that time was super, super encouraging. And it was one of those things where, I needed it the most because I was still uncertain. I wasn't probably doing the best at trying to raise support early on. I would say for the first 3 months, it was very hard with school and with here, but yet God was faithful, and I wanted to be faithful to what I was doing at the time, which was trying to get my degree, was trying to finish my my education. And that was what, even my mom and dad wasn't telling me, like, if God wants you in Hungary, he's going to get you there, but you need to focus on this. And so for me, that was a huge lesson. It's a lesson of, the lesson of God is going to give you something. He's going to bless you with something, but that doesn't mean you don't complete what he's already given you. And so that idea of trying to focus on what is at hand, but still praying and seeking Christ. And, for me, that's always been a struggle. It still is a struggle. I'll talk about that in a bit, but it's been a struggle to sometimes I see the next thing and I see what God's opening up a door, but it's very hard to focus on what's the now. And that can be hard, and that can be challenging. And in some cases it can really ruin what you're doing. But yeah, so that was kind of that whole weird first 3 months of raising support, weird, 2.5, 3 months. It really wasn't happening, but there was one thing I learned, and that is that if you stay faithful to Christ and that you're in his word and you're trying to live for him, even if you're trying to finish something else that he has already put in your place, has put there for you to complete, he's still going to be faithful. And I will be honest, that doesn't mean I understood it. I remember I had people saying, you got to get on this. You got to get on this. Once December hit, it slowly started coming. I will say that early on we were hoping maybe January I'd be fully funded, but when that came around, I wasn't. But those next couple months, December, January, were just kind of one of those months where I was able to finally focus. I finished my student teaching. I had graduated. Now all I was doing was just taking a couple tests, and I'm going to get that in a second. And it's been really cool to see how God's been faithful. I was, you guys know the story of, I was at one school, got switched to another school for student teaching, but that school there was the best place for me. God knew that. Like if you know me, I never wanted to teach at a private Christian school, and I just didn't. And here I was for, 3 months, then plus another 2.5 months of subbing. I was there teaching. And for me, that's been really, an interesting, an interesting dynamic, I guess, when you, I guess, don't really, you don't really understand why he puts you in a position. I think it's sometimes, I feel like he has the greatest humor. God tends to look at you and go, oh, you don't want to be there, but I'm going to put you there. And for me, that was the best thing that happened for me at that time. And throughout that student teaching time, I got real close with the principal and with some other staff, my mentor teacher and other staff, that opened doors. It opened doors for me to be long-term subbing there. It opened doors for the future. It allowed me to have a place that I could be open with and to be honest with. And that was really cool. And so, like I said, in December, I finished, my student teaching. It was I finally felt those bricks off my shoulders. It was finally like, okay, now all I got to do is I got to complete these tests. And if you've watched some of my different videos, these tests have been some of the hardest, especially this one. And I'm going to get back into it. I took it once in the summer, I think once in December, twice in December, or no, once again in January. So I took that test 3 times, missed it every single time. Couldn't pass it. And so in January, I was preparing to take it once more. But also what happened in January was really cool, was that people started, my support, there we go, started coming in. I had people praying for me, people sending me encouraging notes. It just kind of felt like after student teaching, after I finished that task, after I completed what God had put in front of me, he was like, hey, it's time for you to go to your next task. And for me, that was preparing to become a missionary here in Hungary. So in January, I worked really hard of reaching out to people, sending letters, having presentations. And it was really cool. And, God is faithful when you put your trust in him. And like I said, January was really cool. I got to just have some meals with people. You guys remember Jordan? I got to spend a lot of time with him in January as well as in February. Got to have time with my cousins. And yeah, so January was one of those months where I learned more how to be diligent and how to grow. And God was teaching me, like, you got to be patient, but you got to be also on this and steadfast and focused on me. I will supply your needs as long as you focus on me. And, the end of January came and I still wasn't too great with support. But it was time for me to take a test again. And I remember my mom and I, we drove to Columbus. I took my test, and I'll get to that in a second. But what was really cool was February was one of those months that I will always remember. Spiritually, emotionally, mentally, I think everything that I could have ever wanted in a month, raising support, becoming a missionary is that month. And February was amazing because, God truly blessed me. The beginning of February, I went down to Ohio. You guys remember me talking about that. I went down to the Southern Ohio and spent time with my cousins, who I don't see that often. Spent time in Athens at Ohio University where they're at. Just spent time hanging out with them. And I got to spend time with Ryan and Jocelyn. And you all know what they mean to me. And it was truly awesome. It was that moment. And yes, it necessarily wasn't too much of a raising support trip. It was more of, hey, I want to be with my friends. I want to be with my family. And that's something that I think I learned in February the most. I learned that as much as you think you might not need family, God has given us family and friends to be there for each other, to help you grow, to help you mature. And, spending that weekend was amazing. The following weekend I went up to Cleveland with Dad and we spent time just traveling together and then with his friends. And again, I was reminded of God's faithfulness, with just family, friends that have poured into my dad's life, that have poured into our lives when we get the chance to see them. And I think that's what's so cool. And that's what I learned. And at the end of the month, my family put together a little going away party for me right before I left to come here. And why do I share that? What is a lesson I learned? And yeah, it was the family importance, but it was also, it's not about me. And I'll get into that more in a bit too, but it's not about me. My friends and family, they poured into my life during, especially that month, because they knew what I was doing is what God wanted me to do. And what's crazy is February was my best raising support month. I became fully funded in February. And that's because I truly believe that I sat back and I opened my arms and I just kind of said, you know what, Lord, I'm done fighting. I'm done trying to figure this out. I really am. I just want to give it to you and just let you figure. And if I don't leave in March, I don't leave in March. And as you could tell, I left at the beginning of March, and that's something very, very interesting and cool. And going back to my tests, in February as well, I got my test results back. And I remember because I was at a movie theater with my dad. We were watching a movie. I can't remember what movie it was. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening. I don't remember what movie it was. I think I was too focused on getting my score. But I remember I saw the email pop up during the movie and notification. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to go out and spoil the movie if I don't get it. Because at this point, I was kind of like, all right, I'm not that confident that I'll pass it. To be honest, I was worried because if I didn't pass this test before I left, I would have to wait a year again to take it, and I wouldn't have my license as well. I would have to wait to get my license, a whole bunch of things, And I remember walking out, opening the email, and I passed it by 20 points. And I remember Dad can attest, I ran outside. I probably didn't even pay attention. There was cars or anything. So elated. But when I got home and I saw my mom's face and her happiness for me, my dad's happiness, my friend Caleb, my brother, to me, that was truly awesome. And one might say, well, they were just proud of their son. And yeah, that's true. But it was because they were praying for months, and God had answered her prayer, and God had answered my prayer. And I remember that night going, God, I am sorry I doubted you. And I believe that was the moment when I really started, all of this just started opening up and saying, okay, I'm not going to doubt you anymore. Within a couple days, I was fully funded and so on and so forth. And, I was able to get a plane ticket. But what's kind of interesting, and I just love so much, is the fact that there was a moment when they thought that I would get pushed back until the middle of March, or here late March, as today's the last day of March. And it's just so cool because, as you all can see, the coronavirus has shut down so many things. It's closed off countries. It's closed off airports. And if I would have waited, let's say a week and a half, I don't get on that plane. I don't make it here. I don't. But God knew when I needed to be on that plane. God knew when I needed to arrive here, and God knew what I needed to be doing at this very moment. And as I started work, I didn't expect what I would be doing, which was, students being sent home and everything I went into the last couple of episodes ago. All those things that have happened here. And all the lessons I've learned, you might be asking, Ben, what is the big lesson? What is that lesson you've said you've learned? And it's going to be really cliche, and I've probably said it 1,000 times, but God is so, so faithful. He will always be there for you no matter what. And that's what's so crazy. It seems like every time that I've hit a stumbling block, or every time that I think maybe God doesn't want me here, or I don't see the purpose why I'm here, God has he has shown himself through some way, whether that's encouraging me with new friends, encouraging me with Diego and with some of these people, or just encouraging me through his word, through books I've been reading. It's those moments that I will always remember. It's those moments that will give me that long-lasting understanding that whether I, after this year, never be a missionary again, or never go to another country and serve again, I know that during this year, God is going to be so faithful. I was talking with my mentor, and he was saying, well, I've talked with missionaries. They always learn something in their first year. They always gain this big thing that happens in their first year. I joked with him. I guess it wasn't supposed to happen in your first month. And we kind of laughed. But what I've seen through this is that God is going to be faithful through this whole time. No matter if we have summer camps or summer camps are canceled or things shift more, and through all of it, God's got a plan. We can't let this world define us. We can't let that happen. And I want to get my book out here. Sorry, I was getting my book. But yeah, and I brought this book out, and if you watch my last YouTube video, I sort of talked about it, but it's the book called Goliath Must Fall, Winning the Battle Against Your Giants. And this book, I've been reading it. I'm not quite done with it, but it's so cool. It's by Louis Giglio. I recommend go checking it out. It's one of those books that has really convicted me. It's the idea of you can't let your giants consume you. And in that case, for I think a lot of us, those giants right now are a fear of not having comfort, of not having the knowing of what's going on, and at times we let these things become this giant in our life. And what's so cool is Louis Giglio, he says this phrase in this book, and if I can get it here, it says, "Fix your eyes on the size of your God, not the size of your giant." Fix your eyes on the size of your God, not the size of your giant. And that's something I've been challenged by very deeply, I guess, in my own walk with Christ, is I've got to stop worrying about the different things in my life, the different uphill battles, like raising support or a test. But instead, I have to look at my God and say, you are a God that has understanding. You are a God that will always have my back. You're a God that's going to be there for me. You're a God that is bigger than every giant I face in my life. And so God is faithful, and you can trust him. I want to challenge you with that. And this is not coming from Missionary Ben. This is not coming from podcast Ben. This is coming from Ben, of a fallen man who needs Christ every single day of his life. I can't do this without putting my trust in him. It's very easy for me to sit back and ask the question, why? Why this? Why that? Why now? Why me? But I think I have learned, instead of asking the question, why, I need to ask the question, how? How, God, will you use me? How, God, do you want to use me? God, I am here to serve you. So I ask that you all take that consideration, that you all think about that. How can God use you during this time of crisis? How can God use you with your family, your friends? But even more than that, God has given us a gift. And I know it's going to sound crazy. God has given us a gift of this because it's given us time to dig deeper into his word and to dig deeper with our faith in him. So don't worry about what's next, or don't worry about your whys, or how's this going to happen, or how's it going to get done. Don't worry about that. All you have to worry about is knowing that God is in control. There's nothing he can't do. And so I pray that you'll consider, instead of asking why, instead of looking at your giants, look at Christ and say, my God is big. And as the song you say, my God is so big, so strong, and so mighty. And look at that. Don't look at the negative. Don't look at the giants. Don't look at the whys. Don't look at all that. But look at Christ and say, God, how can you use me? How do you want me to be used? And open those doors and open your arms and say, Christ, I am yours. So once again, I thank you. I know I was speaking a lot about my lessons, but it's been on my heart and I wanted to share it with you all. So thank you for taking the time to listen. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, go ahead and start it up, put it to your favorites so you can tune in every week when it comes out, when a new episode comes out. And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and like it, thumbs up it, subscribe to it. I don't know, share it. Share this video if it was encouraging. And most of all, trust in God. Remember, God is faithful and you can trust him. So, as always, we'll talk next time.